Hi, I'm Charles Meyer, and I've had a dream to build a Mini Cooper, a classic Mini Cooper, for probably almost 20 years. And for some reason, I keep collecting photos on all my visits to Europe and wherever I happen to see one, but I never build one. So finally, I had the chance to get a hold of a 1960 Mini Cooper, and I picked this car up. I'm starting this video sort of in the middle of my build per se, but I've had enough friends kind of tease me about making a YouTube video or some sort of video to share the project that we're going to start at this point and then carry on until it's done and running. So what I have right now is I'll end up providing a video that you could back up and check all the initial photos. It'll be somewhat of a slideshow, but where we are now is I had a very rusted 1960 Mini Cooper where the floor was completely rusted out, and I was thinking about building a tube frame chassis for it. And on a long trip to Los Angeles from here in the Bay Area, I was thinking about doing a carbon fiber chassis. And one thing led to another, and I thought about doing this with I-beams. And essentially I made I-beams of carbon fiber into ultimately a flat plate, and I made my own floor. So essentially the old floor is cut out of this one. The nose, as you see it right here, is actually metal at the moment, but we bonded in all the lines. We made our own bumper and our own front spoiler. I kind of just basically made the lines that I wanted to try to get something that would help for some aerodynamics in the front, to give some downforce in the front, and to just clean up the overall lines and make it look good. So from here, we've made a mold. Okay, so we ended up making a mold off of this nose here, and essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off the whole steel front end to save weight and ultimately get the shape that I want. And the reason that I felt okay about doing this for some of the purists out there is that this particular sheet metal, it had some good spots and some bad spots, and I really felt kind of bad about cutting into a nice Mini Cooper. But with all the rust in it, I've kind of given up on worrying about that. And I'm going to replace this front sheet metal that is really just beautiful to look at, but underneath it, it has its structural issues. So we're going to cut it off about here, and then I'm going to put in a full carbon fiber nose. I plan on running a Hayabusa motor in the front, turbocharged Hayabusa, and then a quick change rear end in the back. So it's going to be rear wheel drive. Yeah, essentially it's all going to mount to this flat plate chassis that I'm going to show you, sort of like an RC car. But this will cover up the front. I haven't decided if I'm going to pull it off or do a tilt nose. But when I'm done with all these things, if anybody out there has an interest in nose sections, or I did a roof. This is the mold right now of the roof. The roof is actually in great shape. So I'm going to make a carbon fiber part out of the mold. I'm going to make a carbon fiber part off of the roof. So I'll have a carbon fiber headliner and a carbon fiber roof with the sheet metal skin in between, which might seem a little bit silly to keep the sheet metal skin in place, but my thinking now is that I like the look of the carbon fiber, and if I ever got upside down, having a little extra material is probably not a bad thing. Okay, so the funny thing is that I wanted to build this Mini Cooper project because I wanted my own toy, and I wanted to do it with my own personality, and I wanted to use some of the things that I've learned in the past about building cars on my own personal Mini Cooper. So it always seemed like a cool, like a go-kart for the street. So in any case, I got thinking about it again on this road trip to LA. I'm in the car by myself, and I'm driving down the road, and I'm thinking, you know what, I'm going to do this steel chassis, and da-da-da. And I got thinking about it, and I went, you know what, why don't I do it out of carbon fiber? And so what I ended up coming up with is I had already purchased the sheet metal to make, or the tubing to make the chassis, the tube frame chassis, and I got basically 2x3 material to begin the channels from front to rear. And I thought, what would happen if I made carbon fiber U-shapes off of the tube, and then essentially put them together like this, and then bond them to a flat plate on the bottom, and then turn the whole plate over, and then bond them to the other side. And so essentially what I would get is an I-beam. So I get two sides like that, top plate, bottom plate, and you've got this I-beam structure, so a lot of stiffness fore and aft. So I ended up making 4 I-beams. Ultimately, this entire chassis is full of lots and lots of these pieces. So here's the first I-beam, here's one U, and then here's the other U, and then essentially the top part of the floor and the bottom part of the floor. The next I-beam is here. Here's one. There's a channel, and basically I spaced them kind of in an awkward position. Here's another one because I wanted to support the motor. The motor's sitting off to one side, the Hayabusa motor, and so I wanted to be able to kind of center the weight of that and support it. And then what's happening in between all of these I-beams, I've got these channels like a cardboard box. I've got channels going this way on the top, and then I've got channels going this way underneath. So flat plate, the channels, the 4 I-beams throughout the chassis, and then so this whole thing is basically built like a double wall cardboard box. So just in the front here, I've filled some foam to be able to do a little bit of shaping and to keep debris from going into the center of essentially the chassis. And I'll end up ultimately filling this all in. But the nice thing about these being hollow now too is if I want to run any electrical, I can drill holes into the top of the chassis here, drop my power lines through, run them to the back side, drill a hole there and pull them out, and they run inside this channel, and I don't have wires hanging out all over the chassis. It's kind of a clean setup. So yeah, that's essentially how the main structure is. The bottom of the chassis is all completely flat. I've got a diffuser in the back here. And so it transitions nice and perfectly smooth where the back side of the chassis starts to sweep up, sweeps into the diffuser. And then, yeah, just a simple diffuser out the back. I'll put the shell on here in a second. And you'll see how the whole thing kind of fits together. But the entire chassis now weighs, I think, 170 pounds. So, and I would argue that this chassis is arguably, saying that twice, is arguably stiffer than the floor that was in the car originally. So it really is going to end up being like an RC car. So the chassis, the suspension's going to be on here, the rear end, the motor, it's all going to be mounted to this. And then the shell of the car is just going to be set on top. And that's how I'll run it. Now we have, this is kind of how projects go essentially. You've got some things that are further along and other things that definitely need attention. So you can see that the bottom rail here has been hit at some point. The lines are all funky and we need to straighten that out, get the door in, and then essentially figure out a way to mount it to the chassis. But you get an idea kind of where things are going to start to land. This is going to end up being the floor, the bottom of the floor, so the car is going to sit about 4 inches off the ground. I'm trying to get an idea kind of where tires and wheels are going to land. I'll show you in future videos the tires and wheels. I already have them. We made our own. It's a billet aluminum wheel with a BBS rim half that looks something like the Lola T70s from the 1970s. But in any case, so the wheel is a 16 by 9.5, so a pretty good sized tire, 16 245. And I'm going to try to put half of the tire under the stock body line and half of the tire outside the body line, and then we'll build flares to fit the distance. And as much as I don't want to change really any of the main dimensions of the car, to get the wheel package to fit right, I'm thinking about when I put the full one-piece nose on to extend it forward about an inch, perhaps even 2, to give myself a little bit more room, turning radius when I'm on the tire. And then what I did, I've worked for different companies manufacturing seats and helmets and things like that for Sparco or for Impact Racing. And so I'm kind of conscious of safety. And so what I'm doing now with these doors is both doors have NASCAR foam inside them. That yellow foam is not the NASCAR foam, that's just a finishing foam. But both doors are full of NASCAR style door impact foam. so that if I were to hit a tree or somebody were to hit me, that let's say I might have a little bit of a chance of more impact help. So the doors are actually really, really heavy. While I'm trying to save some weight in different areas, the doors, I decided to go that route, make it extra stout. Something else that I think is going to look kind of cool in this car is I'm copying my brother Mike. He had this agenda for doing push rod rear suspension in the back of a Mustang, which he's made several of them, and they've gained some popularity. So I'm going to do a similar push rod rear suspension in the back of the Mini Cooper is my agenda at the moment. So I'll basically just have 2 push rods going down to the independent rear suspension that'll be hidden, let's say, underneath here. I want the interior of the car to kind of sort of look street-ish. I don't want it to look like some full tube frame race car. I really want this thing to have some sort of a classic real car feel when you walk up to it. It's not going to look like some carbon fiber monster. But the shocks, which I got from Integra out of Michigan, these are really, really nice. They're single adjust rebound shocks. These are called UPG10 springs. They're like a titanium, but it's not titanium. It's what they use in NASCAR. Super high-end spring. I got that from Renton Coil in Renton, Washington. So push rods, really nice shock package. Super lightweight deal. This entire spring and shock combination weighs about, I weighed it, it's 1,100 grams. So just a skosh over 2 pounds, that entire assembly, so spring and shock package. So pretty cool deal. I'll have these on all 4 corners. I haven't decided yet how I'm going to package the spring and shock program in the front with the motor, but I thought having this displayed in the rear window here would end up being pretty cool. So yeah, that's another crazy whacked idea. So another thing is on the back end here, what I essentially want to do is I want to make this trunk fully functional. So the only thing that I'm going to put back here is essentially a fuel tank, and I'm most likely going to make it rectangular to fit flat against the bottom of the floor. I've got the rear end just up there, but I'll probably put the fuel tank here and then have it mounted here. I'll do a nice stainless fuel tank. Keep the center of gravity low. I want to make a bench seat there again so that the rear seat does work. And you're going to end up having to go your legs over a drive shaft, which is not common in a Mini Cooper, but essentially that's how it ought to look. So yeah, next video to be continued. Hopefully in the next month or so we'll make some substantial progress and bring you another cool update. So for now, Charles Meyer, check it out.